Hello everyone, I'm Admiral McFish, and this is a tutorial on how to hack the bosses Bradtos and Tangram in Virtual on Oratorio Tangram. If you want to learn more about the process by which I do this, I recommend looking at the very first video that I made on the basics of game hacking, as well as the previous video that I made on Virtual on Operation Moongate. For this hacking process, you'll need the same things that you do for basically any single process. You'll need the program you want to hack open, you'll need a hacking program such as ArtMoney or Cheat Engine, as well as selecting the process in the program itself, so it is hacking the process directly. And you'll also occasionally, and especially in this game, need a set of character values that you'll be looking for. Now, I just want to give a huge thank you to a guy called Accel Rider X, who did an absolutely brilliant thing by sending me the character values for this game. I mentioned this to a few people before, but I could not for the life of me work out what the character values were in this game. It was so ludicrously hard. They weren't listed in the test menu or the record screen of the Dreamcast port. They weren't listed anywhere except when somebody on the Cutting Room Floor forums, which is a great website by the way, I recommend checking it out, hacked a little more into the game and found a debug menu with the correct list of character values. Why they made this hidden, I have absolutely no clue. I don't think they could have ever comprehended that people 20 years later from them making the game would actually be hacking it to try and make these characters, but who knows. It might have just been a way to try and test out the bosses of the game directly, which might explain why they hid it even in the arcade version. I just don't know. What is brilliant about this, though, is that as a result of him sending me these values, we can now hack and play as these two bosses. And yeah, despite what you might think, they are actually playable. Not tremendously playable, but they are playable. And I'll show you now how to hack them. So as always, go into arcade mode. And I'd recommend with this game to only stick to Cypher, Grys-Vok, and Apharmd B when it comes to hacking. The other characters are a bit temperamental. They don't always search for the right values when you're trying to search for their value. It doesn't come up with quite the right addresses. It's a bit temperamental, so I recommend sticking to Cypher, Grys-Vok, and Apharmd B when you're doing this. Also, with this game, make sure you only search for values when you are directly in a match itself. If you do it in the character selection screen, it probably will screw up and you won't get the correct values. It's just how 3D fighting games tend to work in regards to this sort of thing. So, initially speaking, we search for a value. So we'll do it with 2, which is Cypher's value. And then this is the Dreamcast version I'm playing, so you just press all 4 regular buttons and press Start. And that will bring you back to the menu screen. So we go back in and we will select Grys-Vok instead. Or Grys-Vok, whatever you want to call him. Right, and now we filter for any subsequent values. So we'll filter for 3, which is Grys-Vok's value. Sometimes you might want to filter in succession. It just tends to narrow down the address a bit more easily. Now we'll go for Apharmd B or Apharmd Beta, whatever his name is. And his value is 4, so we filter for the value of 4. Great. Now let's go back to Cypher again and filter for his value, I do believe just one more time, as that should narrow it down just enough so that we can start checking these addresses we found. So filter for 2. Great. Now, as with Virtual On, you have so many different values here. Most of it is related to the various models, movesets, parts of the character itself. It's just how 3D fighting games tend to work. It's not like with 2D ones where it's only one value controlling everything. They have parts that control the model, that control sometimes ligaments, often movesets and things like Tekken or Virtua Fighter. It's quite interesting, I have to say, but it does make hacking a fair bit more difficult. So if we look for the value for the first boss now, that's Bradtos, it's 14. So let's take a few of these values and let's just put it in about 8 different values here. Just try and test out, see which one of these are the character addresses we're actually looking for. Now we'll freeze those all in place. Use Control and Shift if you want to highlight a bunch of values at once. Then right-click and go to Freeze. Now that we've done that, let's go to single player mode and check if this has worked. Yep, there we go. Pretty weird, huh? Now, from my recollection, when you start trying to play as these guys, they tend to screw up. They tend to have something where they don't quite work at first. But it seems to vary from playthrough to playthrough. It might cause your game to crash, or it might be perfectly fine. It's very strange. As you can see, with Bradtos here, you can move around with him freely. You can't see anything, but you can move him around, so... And you can press the right and left trigger buttons as you'd hope. I think he does fire something if you press both of them, but it doesn't seem to really indicate it very easily anyway. And as you can see, a lot of lag because you're not supposed to see this kind of screen with a boss. Let's just do another stage with him here. And yeah, as you can see, I mean, he just... Yeah, you can play as him. You can even press one of the buttons to make him actually do that thing where he like lays on the ground, or lays one of his halves on the ground, but it's not very consistent. He only does it at certain points for some reason. As you can see, not very easy to play as, but I mean, it's the novelty of it anyway that's very, very interesting. And now we know that these are the values that control the character we're playing as. So, if we go to 15, because that's the value of Tangram, yes, what we find is we can play as Tangram. Yeah. And that's what sometimes will happen, is it might well crash the game. But what I found is that even if it does crash it, when you go back to it next time, they won't crash it again. Now, I cannot promise that that will be the case. As Accel himself was telling me, he was having a lot of problems. He kept finding that it kept resetting or crashing when he tried to play as them. But I found with Tangram, most of the time, I was able to play as her just fine. So we'll go back again, and I'll just show you what it's like. Show you that, from what I recall at least, trying to play as her was just fine. Okay. Yeah, and that's it. Now, what caused it to crash before was because I was using the right trigger button. But now I'm pressing it and it's working perfectly fine. I don't know why it is. Maybe the game just manages to reset itself properly, maybe it's able to put itself in line better, maybe it acts in kind of debug mode where it makes them properly playable. I have no clue. I mean, this is for the novelty of it anyway. This was never supposed to be possible. The fact that it is possible, the fact that it doesn't crash when you're playing as them, is just a testament to how amazing Sega were in this era. absolutely incredible that we can do something as stupid and as wonderfully silly as this, but, you know, that's part of the reason I'm doing this in the first place. It's just so wonderfully weird. Right, I'll just do one more stage as Tangram because that's a funny thing, isn't it? It's just so wonderfully weird to see. And yeah, now I can use all of his moves with no problem, which is very interesting. And that's it, really. That's just how amazingly well it's actually programmed. I don't know why it's trying to make me save data. And that's about it, really. Yeah, as you can see, it works a bit too well. I'm just going to show you what happens when you get up to Bradtos. You might think it would actually crash the game or something, but again, it's so well made that it's perfectly fine, would you believe? Okay, maybe not. Okay, so as you saw, well, I mean, as you saw there, it might crash. I found it was fine the last time I was playing it, but as you see, sometimes it will crash, sometimes it won't crash. It's very, very strange. That's, of course, because we're trying to do something that we're really not supposed to be doing. But it's just so funny that it's so temperamental with this one. Usually when it comes to a game, certain actions, certain bosses, certain characters will always cause it to crash, like the bosses in the early Mortal Kombat games. Do anything with them, it will crash it. But with this one, we can sometimes play as Tangram perfectly fine, with no real problem. Sometimes it'll crash from the beginning. It's all very interesting, but again, it's another one of these really interesting anomalies that you don't get with very many games, very many series in general. I hope this helped everybody out. I doubt anybody's going to seriously do this, except for the novelty of it, but I hope somebody gets some enjoyment out of this, finds it interesting, maybe does it themselves, or maybe just gets a bit more interested in game hacking and boss hacking in general as a result of this video. Thanks very much, as always, for watching, and again, huge thanks to Accel Rider X, because without him, this would not have been possible.